Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. In November of 2020, the Democrats and their allies intentionally changed and ignored state law in the administration of the election. They were planning to pull off the greatest scheme, worse than Watergate. They didn't think we would catch them, but we did. Find out more details about what happened, how they did it, in the new documentary film called 2,000 Mules, directed and narrated by renowned filmmaker and my friend, Dinesh D'Souza, and executive produced by the Salem Media Group. This is also with research from truethevote.org. 2,000 Mules tells the story of the ones who tried to hijack a presidential election. You'll see the actual video surveillance tapes. You'll see how their cell phones were tracked to box after box as they got paid to carry out this illegal scheme. Watch the movie and decide the truth for yourself. Attend a limited release premiere of 2,000 Mules on May 2nd or May 4th. Check your local listings and get your tickets today at 2000mules.com. That's the number 2000mules.com.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Well, happy Thursday, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and as you can see, we are not in my main studio. It's because I have the privilege and honor to be here with my very dear friend, Mike O'Fallon, who is the president and founder of Sovereign Nations. And if you haven't heard his podcast yet and all of his work with James Lindsay, they're an organization that was actually the first to sound the alarm bells on critical race theory and so much in the culture that's going on. And we're going to be speaking about culture today, but tell us a little bit about Sovereign Nations before we begin.
Well, Sovereign Nation started in 2017 with our intention really of taking on what most people would be referring to as the Great Reset right now, but also all the ways that that's coming into the world, how it's coming in ideologically, how it's coming in politically, how it's coming in through education, and as well how all of this is surrounded by kind of a corporate push at the same time to kind of override any kind of constitutional barriers that might get in the way. So that's what we started in 2017.
Yeah, and it's been a phenomenal ministry, truly, because this is something that not only for Christians and people who want to continue to discover truth and continue to promote and advocate for truth, really need to understand how the culture is being weaponized by the left in order to influence politics and ultimately influence how we think about the world around us. And so, Mike, one of the things, and I wanted to get your take on this because I listened to your podcast yesterday where you gave such an eloquent explanation of this really interesting cultural, just trend on Twitter that happened a couple of days ago with the Sports Illustrated model, who, of course, being a size 14, is an overweight woman. And she is now being lauded as, she's someone who is beautiful. And Jordan Peterson quote tweeted that particular picture. And if you haven't seen that picture, go Google it if you want to. But I won't actually put this up for listeners because I think it's actually a little risque because she's in a two-piece, and I don't think it's flattering at all. But that's my opinion, right? And so Jordan Peterson also tweeted an opinion and said, "Sorry, not beautiful," and basically the left isn't going to convince me otherwise. And so this concept of what is beauty, and also this idea that the left can compel speech from you or me or Jordan Peterson to say we have to adhere to their new standard of beauty, and that this is somehow shaming this model to have the opinion that I don't think she's beautiful. Well, some people, don't prefer blondes. That's not shaming me. That's an opinion. We're allowed to have opinions and preferences. We also need to get back to the basic concept of the true definition of beauty. So, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think if you take a look at anything within our culture as a social construct, and then if you take a look at beauty and the way that we perceive beauty as a social construct, then that means that if anyone looks at something and is discriminating, let's say, and saying, well, that is beautiful and that isn't, that's something that I find attractive, that's something that brings joy to my heart, or that's something that inspires me. If you're to say that, then in today's world of critical theory, and this is a proper application of critical theory, and really when you think of the word critical theory, it really is something that's a lot more than just a theory. It's a lens that you look through. And so what you do is you use that critical lens then to deconstruct the concept of what someone would say is beautiful or what society believes is beautiful. The things that inspire people, the things that men write poems about, the things that inspires people to write symphonies about. And then you say, no, that's just a social construct. And what you have to understand is what inspired you to think that way is really this power dynamic that exists around you. So what we have to do is we have to completely destroy or criticize that concept of beauty to death. And then what we have to rise up is the concept of ugliness that you would perceive as ugliness, but is actually beautiful. So we're in upside down world where black is white and white is black. And so if you want to get rid of the culture that surrounds you, then what you want to do is say everything that you say that you care about, everything that a man says he finds attractive, everything that a woman says she finds attractive about a man, well, that must be destroyed. And then what you have to do is say, that thing that you love so much, that thing that inspired you, that thing that brought you to tears, that music that you listened to from that composer from the mid-19th century, or Ralph Vaughan Williams or Debussy or whatever the case may be, that thing that you found beautiful is actually ugly. And you just don't know it. And here's the thing that's beautiful. And that's what Jordan Peterson was referring to.
Yeah, and he got slammed on Twitter as shaming this woman, as being discriminating, and as being judgmental, and all of these other negative terms, when he's simply pointing this out. And it's interesting that the left, as you said, is blurring these lines between the genders. They are tearing down everything that is beautiful and feminine, isn't just rooted in misogynistic history and tradition. I mean, that's what the left would say. And what is attractive about masculinity, I mean, these are things that are inherent to God's characteristics and how he made us uniquely male and female. And so there is objective beauty, but also in terms of having discriminating taste. So that actually used to be a positive thing. But now everyone uses that term discrimination as a negative.
Right. So in other words, what you're saying is that everyone discriminates, and that there's a positive use for discrimination in anything. And so let's say, like, if you're listening to Jenna's podcast right now, and you're someone who's married or you're someone who's engaged, and you've chosen that partner to be your wife or to be your husband, is that you discriminated. And I'm sure that maybe some of that was physical. I mean, you couldn't leave that out of that. It was
Nor
also,
should you.
Right.
I mean, it's the whole thing. And yes, you discriminate against people that you date. You discriminate even when you order food. You choose one thing and you say no to everything else on the menu. guess what? That's okay, But we use this term discrimination in a way that has harnessed that term and has manipulated it as if any form of discrimination or judgment is always wrong. And
Right.
so when people are on the left will say, well, you just have to support and affirm me.
Right.
Affirmation of anyone's choices are what the left wants, because they want to break down the barriers ultimately between right and wrong and good and evil. And as you said, they want to make right wrong and
Right.
wrong right. And
Correct.
so this is a much, much bigger ultimate issue and just a symptom of the bigger problem. And so when we're talking about things like this Sports Illustrated model and Jordan Peterson's response to this, it's very easy to just get caught up on this is one issue. Why does this one magazine cover matter? But you can't look at it in isolation from what the left is trying to do as a whole.
Right. And so we used another example in the podcast about when I had landed at an airport, I think it was in London, and we saw these giant murals on the wall of a very well-known clothing designer. And on one wall was all men that were dressed as women, and on the other wall were all women that were masculinated, if you will. They were made to look masculine and hard and rough and so forth. So you de-beautified the woman and you demasculated the men. And what you told everybody is that you need to be attracted to the thing that is the opposite of what that person in their objective reality actually represents. So you have to think about this from the perspective of, well, what else are they going to tell us to do that with? Is it going to stop with just our normal understanding of, well, this is beautiful or not? Well, where does it go from there? Well, if that's something that can be broken down, which is a cognitive response, right? Jenna Ellis, when she sees something, or let's say that she's looking for a dress that she's going to wear to a big occasion, she goes through a process cognitively where she goes, okay, that's going to look great on me. And as well, I love the way that, whether it's the chiffon this or the way that this billows here or wherever. And so she thinks of herself as, I'm going to be beautiful in that. That's something that I want on me. Well, what they want to do is say, let's interrupt those cognitions. Let's create a barrier there. And instead, what Jenna Ellis needs to say is, where's the brown bag? I just want to put on a brown bag because that's the thing now that is beautiful, because someone told me that's what beautiful is, or I need to dress like a dude. So
look at Demi Lovato as a perfect example. And we'll put this up actually for those of you who are watching the show. We'll put up this image. And for those of you who are just listening on audio, you can go and Google this, or go to the Rumble or YouTube show on this. But when she was first as an actress, she's a very beautiful actress. And as soon as she went woke, and what has been trending on Twitter is go woke, go broke, she is now morbidly obese. She has hair that's shaved, that is dyed blue, wears ugly colors, and objectively is not beautiful anymore. And you can see that contrast and that distinction. And so many people have asked me actually on media, Jenna, why is it that conservative women are so much hotter than leftists? And my response, and of course that people say, well, that's just an opinion. But my response always is, because we care about being feminine. We care about being who God made us in his image. And as women, we want to accentuate that. We value that. Where the left doesn't. They want to be men. And they want to blur the lines between genders. And so, of course, they're not going to be as objectively beautiful.
Right. And it's not just the physical things either, is it?
Right.
It's also the way that you hold yourself. It's the way that you phrase yourself. It's the way that you are in public. It's the way that both men and women know how to act in order to respect one another, and as well be the thing that they've been created to be.
Yeah.
And so we have to not just look at this as what it is that we're doing physically and how we are dressing, or maybe how we take care of ourselves or not take care of ourselves, as my case may be. But we have then an ideal. And so there's an ideal that I'm trying to reach, let's say, that I know will both be something that will, yes, my wife will find me more attractive that way, but then as well, I will also be healthy that way. And so here's the other part. This is the other thing that comes into this. We have a mutual friend, Dr. James Lindsay, and he wrote these things back several years ago, these hoax papers. And one of his hoax papers was fat bodybuilding. And what he was saying is that a fat body is a built body, and it took time to get it that way. And no one can tell you that you aren't healthy by that. That's the way that the man looks at things. That's the way that culture, it's a social construct to say that means that you're healthy or not. And so the idea is, and the idea is actually currently within the medical professions, is for doctors not to look at someone and say, well, look, Mike, you're overweight. You need to lose weight. It just, man, this isn't good. And for people to say, hey, man, you look great when I lost 30 or 40 pounds or whatever the case. It's like, no, that's wrong. That's hate. You need to accept that person the way that, well, hold on a second. If that person is doing something that's going to better their life, that's going to give them a longer life, and as well as going to be able to make them more mobile, make them more attractive to their spouse, whatever the case, that's a good thing.
Well, and to say, oh, you have to be attractive for your spouse, then somehow that's not genuinely loving the other person, because everything is so myopically focused on, you live the best life for yourself. And so now relationships, especially, in my generation and younger, especially, I mean, even like my younger brother's age, it's this whole idea that true partnership means just affirming the other person's life choices, no matter how they affect you. So if, we're trying to build this partnership, but you want to take a job, somewhere that will remove yourself from the relationship for 3 or 4 years, well, I need to support that. And no conversation can be had about that, how that impacts the unit. And so this whole idea, again, of tearing down all of the traditional concepts that are deeply rooted in who we are as human beings made in the image of God, that includes family, it includes marriage, it includes all of these dynamics. And so I hope that you're starting to see and recognize that that tearing down all of these truthful concepts is more than just one, shaming of a supermodel. But it's something that is the left is trying intentionally to reprogram us to not appreciate and respect who we are as human beings made in the image of God, the difference between the sexes, what marriage means, what family means, what government is supposed to do. I mean, all of these different things in culture, it all goes back to whether you are rooted in truth and a biblical worldview, or whether you are rooted in this Marxist ideology that ultimately, I mean, it reminds me of the painter Picasso, where it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's all completely random, and beauty means chaos.
Right. And if you think about what happened in the age of Picasso, really, Picasso would almost be considered beautiful to some of the things that were created after him. But, because, well, when you came out of that Beaux Arts period, where there was actual standards to beauty and to art and so forth, and all of a sudden you had this elimination of that, and I forget the name of the French artist who then said art was a men's urinal to him. So well, that's art. Well, art
or
doesn't.
The banana stuck on the wall with duct tape.
Exactly.
That's art.
Yeah, because that's my conception of art. So you're deconstructing there. But here's a good example: is if you think about, and you've traveled to London, I think, right?
Multiple times. Love it.
When someone goes to London and people visit London, they don't say, "Okay, we can't wait to go to the business district." The business district is so lovely. It's all the buildings that are 45 stories tall, and they all have glass, and maybe one's clear glass, one's dark glass, and the same steel structures and so forth. What they say is, let's go see Parliament. Let's go see Westminster Chapel. Let's go see Buckingham Palace. Hey, let's go to Covent Gardens and walk the streets. And there's something charming and beautiful and wonderful. Let's go to Whitehall and see that. And so those are the things that pull people, and they have a connection to history and those that came before them. When they built their civilizations with the concept that this is something that's beautiful, that's worth preserving, it's worth dying for, it's worth going to war for, to preserve. That's the way that civilizations used to look at their cities. But now what do? Well, utility has become, in many ways, the worst enemy. Is that it's there for utilitarian function, but it's not someplace you want to live. It's not someplace you want to be. Where do we all go when we want to be someplace? I mean, we're near the Washington, D.C. area right now. Well, everybody wants to go to those comfortable older places, or someplace that is charming, and to have a cup of cappuccino, to have a wonderful meal, and to have discussion with their friends, because they feel at home. But that's not what we're creating now. No. We're creating soulless cities that are not things that you really want to defend. They're things that you want to tear down 30 years from now and then rebuild whatever the newest thing is. So unfortunately, we get into this cycle. And in many ways, I think that's what happens in human relationships.
Mm.
Is that when you fall in love with somebody in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and you fall in love with who they are then, but then you grow old and beautiful together in a way that you both appreciate, and you're still willing to die for that person. And instead, our society thinks of things and says, no, after 20, 30 years, I'm going to replace you for something else new. It's a disposable economy. It's a
Yeah.
disposable way of looking at the world. And instead, we should cherish the things that are beautiful.
That is so well said. And if you saw Mike's wife who is here, they're so adorable together, and I love them. And that's just so well spoken because that it's so true in the cycle of relationships. Not only is it very self-serving, and so when I fall out of love, therefore I discard you, but it is also all about the new because everyone focuses on the new and the exciting rather than the the thing that lasts and that you keep maintaining and you grow and you build and you work at it and you maintain it. I mean, it's so much
Yes.
more valuable when it's something that you preserve over time. I mean, this is why, fine things tend to age well and they increase in their value. But we do live in a commoditized society where
Yes.
everything is disposable, including humans. I mean, we're even commoditizing children now. We're trying to gender select. We're trying to select even how children look, and it is a utilitarian and a completely disposable society. And so we dispose of not only things that we should maintain and cherish, but that does include human relationships. And when we're talking about beauty, one of the things that stood out to me that you mentioned was standards, and to have a standard of beauty and artistry. And it's always been fascinating to me looking at the world around us, how we all, because the Bible says, we have the laws of nature and of nature's God in our heart, we all do have the same fundamental concept of true beauty. What notes and melodies work together? What is offensive to the ear? What is pleasing to the eye? I mean, when you look at nature, everyone looks at my hometown, which is near Rocky Mountain National Park. You look at the mountains and you think this is beautiful. Why? Because the colors go together, and God created so beautifully. And it's not just for utilitarian. God is an artist. And when you look at what we all understand actually works together in harmony, in every concept, and in every medium, whether that's genuine true art, whether that's buildings, whether it's nature, whether it's even relationships, a male and female coming together in marriage, having the family unit. I mean, all of these things that naturally are in harmony. That is the laws of nature, nature's God, being expressed and acknowledged through us. And the left is trying purposefully to destroy that and to say, we are going to replace this with everything that is ugly, and you are going to purposefully try to perceive it as this new concept of beauty. And it's so sad and destructive.
Yes.
So we need to go back to having standards, and the left doesn't want standards. They want utter chaos. So speak to that a little bit as well, of this notion that standards are actually a good thing. I mean, in law, if we didn't have standards and predictability, I couldn't do my job for clients, right? The law needs to be predictable. We need to have standards in every aspect of society, but including art and beauty.
Well, I think that what you'd see is that there's a cycle, right? Is that we go through and we have our standards. We have our standards that maybe if you're a woman and you're about ready to get married, when a woman then goes to look at where they're going to have the reception for the wedding, she usually doesn't want to go to the newest modern hotel that just opened up in the city that has a ballroom like a box.
Mm-hmm.
She usually wants to go to that beautiful older place that has the chandeliers and so forth, because that's the way that she wants to remember. There's a connection to the past in that. And so we have, yes, these ways that we perceive naturally in the way that God has designed us to see something that is beautiful. But so what they want us to do is, yes, then enter into that period of chaos where there's confusion, where I don't understand. It's, this isn't something that I would think would be beautiful, but I guess I'm supposed to think it's beautiful. And I think that that's what Dr. Peterson was talking about, looking at the cover of this magazine.
Yeah.
But so you go into this chaos, but what the idea is, the social constructors are trying to come out on the other side of that to say, well, here's the new standard.
Mm-hmm.
It's much like how we've gone through this period of what we would say is heteronormativity, is that the normal function of people in our life and in our society is heteronormativity. In other words, that men and women get married, have children, have lives, and that's the family union. So what they want to do is then construct what is normal as homonormativity, is that the normal basis for mankind or for humankind is where women find women attractive, men find men attractive, and all of a sudden what was created for us to be in terms of normal is changed. Well, it's going to be the same thing with everything that we perceive.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we would say, well, that's beautiful, now it's going to be said, that's ugly, and the ugly is beautiful, and that becomes the standard.
And if you go along with the traditional heritage of beauty, then you're bigoted, you're closed-minded, you're antiquated, you're among the old guard, and this is so terrible. And those standards we still need to cherish, and we need to recognize that those things are absolutely worth preserving because of their connection ultimately to truth. And when the left is not only trying to implement these standards, but they're trying to now actually compel us, not just program us how to think, but for those of us who object to that and say, no, I'm sorry, that's not a standard of beauty that I adhere to. They're trying to shut us down and say, you're bigoted, you are shaming this woman, you can't speak that, you have to speak our new truth instead of the truth of God. And
right.
And in just the last few minutes we have here, I was also reminded as you were speaking, when I had COVID a few years ago, the only symptom that I had was I lost my taste and smell for about 5 days. And like completely. And for those of you who've had COVID and you experienced that phenomenon, not only was it just really weird and very synthetic and artificial, but it actually made me stop and think about how, to the function and the utilitarian necessity of eating and of nourishing our bodies and stuff, we don't actually need taste and smell. Like I obviously ate when I couldn't taste anything.
That's right, Jenna.
But I didn't like it. I didn't want to. I didn't care. And I thought, how terrible that I'm missing out on the flavors and the senses and this, wonderful aspect of God's creation that we get to enjoy. And I thought, if God was simply a utilitarian God, then we wouldn't have beauty and flavor and art and all of these things that are so delightful. And I thought, how wonderful is it that God made us with these senses and abilities to enjoy his creation?
Right, like you don't need to tell a toddler that they're not going to like broccoli. They're probably not going to like broccoli. You also don't need to tell the toddler that they're going to like chocolate ice cream.
Right.
They're probably going to like chocolate ice cream. And the thing is that in losing your senses of smell and taste, did you have that ability to start recalling in memory, though?
A little bit.
What the taste was and what you expected?
Yeah, a little bit.
And
it was very weird because it was like I knew I wasn't actually, it was almost like this phantom sense.
Yes.
And it was very weird. But as things came back, it was like I enjoyed them for the first time.
Right.
My friend Myrna and I went to get Mexican food, which is one of my favorites. I love it, at this place on the DC Wharf that I just love. And the first meal that I had when I had my full restored senses, I thought, this is the greatest thing ever. And it was like I enjoyed it anew. This sounds so childlike, but it's true that I marveled in God's creation anew, saying, thank you, Lord, for all of the wonderful things that you made simply for us to enjoy. And those include human relationships. And during COVID, when we couldn't be in person, I missed that so much. And thankfully, there were a few people, like you and our good friend Ryan Helfenbein and others, we didn't care. And we still met in person. And I was like, we didn't. And I hugged you guys because I'm like, human interaction. This is so great. But we're made to delight in the Lord.
That's right.
And delight in true beauty.
Yeah. And I think the thing to remember too is that that's something innately that God has given us.
Yeah.
And he's given that to us for our pleasure, to live within his kingdom, to live under his rules, and to be able to have joy and happiness in our lives. Because that is the natural order of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But to have delight and joy in the things that he has created for our good.
Yes.
And so I think the takeaway from this, and I so appreciate you coming on for the show, because I listened to your podcast. So listen to the Sovereign Nations podcast, and tell everyone where we can go and hear that real quick.
SovereignNations.com, you can listen to public occurrences, both foreign and domestic, or the causes of things.
Yes. And as I was listening to this yesterday, I thought, I have to get Mike to talk about this because, and it was just so great that we're here in person together and can do this, because this is such a more rich conversation that I think a lot of people we don't take these things that are trending on Twitter and think about them as deeply in the root issue. And I think one of the main takeaways from this is that we need to, as Christians, stand back and say, what has God given to us as a standard? And ultimately, it's for our good. The law reveals to us our need for a Savior, but it also reveals to us, you talk about wanting to live your best life. God told us how. And it's not because he wants to punish us. It's like a parent that wants their children to enjoy the abundance that they as parents want to give and to stay away from the things that are harmful and bad. And our God is a good God.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And I think about that in terms of our worship.
Yes.
Is our worship beautiful?
Yes.
Or is it simply something that is utilitarian, ugly, and powerful? Powerful is good, but beauty combined with power is unbeatable.
Yeah, so well said. Well, Mike O'Fallon, thank you so much for joining me today. And this has been another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show, and I will see you guys on Monday.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. I also want to talk about another great American who is the sponsor of this podcast, and that, of course, is my good friend Mike Lindell. He has been canceled out of so many box stores for simply standing up for his own political opinion. And disagree or not, or support him or not, it is a fundamental right of every American to be able to voice their opinion, and that absolutely includes politics. That absolutely includes issues that are central to our culture. That includes faith. Mike is such a very sincere Christian, and I am proud to consider him a friend, and he is, of course, a friend of this show. So right now, there is a special on MyPillow.com. Click on the new radio listener specials. Get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including a great towel set, which is a 6-piece set. It includes 2 bath, 2 hand towels, 2 washcloths, made in the USA, regularly $109.99, now just $39.99, but you have to use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. That tells Mike that you listen to this show, you're happy that he is a sponsor of this show, and you will get great discounts, but use the promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, either at mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna.